We're back, live here from the MIT Media Lab, kicking off the afternoon keynote presentation on hacking the law with NYC Council member Ben Kallos, who has been, frankly, a real inspiration to the legal physics research team here at the lab as we look at how to comprise our work and, frankly, what is achievable, what's important. And I think public servants, when they do their job really well, can help to articulate sets of priorities. And that's what Ben did when he made a presentation at Brooklyn Law School at an event that Jonathan Askin convened and I was at, and I heard his call. He made a call to the law students and others to hack the law, and he explained why it was important and how to do it, and how we can do it today. And we've done what we can to answer that call and to be supportive and to work with some efforts of multiple jurisdictions and partners such as OpenGov Foundation, who you heard from, and others who you will hear from. But you ain't seen nothing yet. So without further ado, I give you Benjamin Kallos. And thank you for coming in person to kick off this event.
You got it.
And to answer that call, supportive and work with some efforts of multiple jurisdictions and partners such as the Gov Foundation, heard from and others who you will hear from.
My name's Councilmember Ben Kallos. I want to start off by saying first a big thank you to Jonathan Askin for having me at his legal hackathon and for hosting so many legal hackathons. It wasn't his first, and it certainly won't be his last. And that's where I got to meet Dazza Greenwood, and I want to thank him and MIT Media Lab, who convened this illustrious group, including Seamus Kraft and Bill Hunt of OpenGov Foundation, Thomas Neal and Rebecca Williams of Sunlight Foundation, David Moore of Participatory Politics Foundation, my fellow elected officials, New York City Council member Brad Lander and San Francisco Supervisor Mark Farrell, as well as peers in Boston, Chicago, and the District of Columbia. Most importantly, all of you who have joined us today online and in person. Councilmember Ben Kallos, you can reach me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and my GitHub repo at Ben Kallos, BenKallos. Please take out your phones or tablets or laptops, or assuming you're on all that, but that's how I know you're paying attention and how I know that the world can participate in what we're doing here today. I'm an attorney, free and open source software developer, and now a New York City Council member. Before we can move forward, it's important to know how we got here, so please join me in a journey 3,786 years back in time through legal history to 1772, before the Common Era, and yes, there's an app for that. Hammurabi sought to bring about the rule in the land by placing more than 282 laws on 7-foot-tall Daira steel. These laws were set by a king. Within a century, monotheism would emerge with 10 commandments inscribed in tablets and 613 laws codified among the stories of the Jewish people and 5 books written by a religious leader. By the 5th century before the Common Era, we see direct democracy in Athens, Greece, for adult citizen men who have completed military service. In approximately 450 before the Common Era, the Romans would adopt 12 tables in response to sesso plebis, or general strike by the plebeian citizens. The march of history continues. The law, who makes the law, how the law is made, the accessibility of the law, and the fair application of that law continues to waver to and fro as the people struggle for the power contained therein. However, new technology and the birth of information age provides a unique moment for change. Change at an exponential rate that can outpace Moore's law. Following the birth of the World Wide Web, Congress empowered the Library of Congress to create thomas.loc.gov in 1995. So now we could actually read federal law and follow legislation online. By the time I graduated law school in 2005, a decade later, the laws at a local level were not accessible. I realized that our state and municipal laws, those that affect us on the most local levels, were locked behind the Westlaw and LexisNexis, aka Wexis, paywalls. leaving me wondering, how could anyone be expected to obey the laws they couldn't freely access? In 2006, I set out to get them online by founding wikilaw.org to set the law free online. Soon after, I would come to the same realization as Lawrence Lessig. Special interests, the legal publishing companies, and the entire legal profession had a strong interest in keeping the law out of the hands of the people, and that under current political system, the laws were not serving the public interest, but special interests. I quickly merged my project with Jurispedia.org and went to work in changing government through political activism. In 2007, the next step in the right direction was OpenCongress.org, a project of Participatory Politics Foundation and Sunlight Foundation, where you can read, comment, and improve upon federal legislation. It proved that nonprofits and civic hackers could join together in order to modernize our government. In 2009, I launched OpenLegislation.org with Tom Neal to make New York State's legislation public, and it was so disruptive that city and state legislatures ended up doing so themselves. By 2013, Tom Neal had joined Sunlight Foundation and worked with his team to bring that same transparency nationwide with OpenStates.org. In 2013, I ran for city council, crowdsourced my platform on KallosForCouncil.com. I started with 100 solutions and collected 33 solutions from the community. We also posted our platform to github.com/KallosForCouncil, and everything is now on benkallos.com. It's a Drupal 6 build that I maintain myself. I won. Now I'm in the New York City Council. I've introduced disruptive legislation to dramatically change the way government operates. Free and open source software preference models on state laws are already put in place in New Hampshire by Seth Cohn and in Oklahoma by Jason Murphy, and federal legislation proposed by Congressman Darrell Issa. Civic Commons to create a centralized code repository for the free and open source software that will be operating our government. OpenFOIL to bolster New York's open data law, ensuring compliance with freedom of information requests using transparency, and to drive more content into our open data portal through One Strike and you're in. Electronic notices, requiring notifications through a central portal in computer-readable format so that public notice is more accessible than a corkboard or periodical available only in government offices. Also, a Public Online Information Act, because in the 21st century, public information must equal online. And that's just my opening salvo. Under the leadership of Council Member Brad Lander, we've adopted broad sweeping rules reforms and proposed legislation to open up our laws. We're demanding that vendors open up the APIs that host the legislation so that you can do whatever you want with it. I have a Declaration of Independence of Law. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that laws are wholesome and necessary for the public good, that ignorantia juris non excusat is a maxim of universal application, that every man is presumed to know the law, and it would seem inherent that freedom of access to the laws or the official interpretation of those laws should be coextensive with the sweep of the maximum. Knowledge is the only just condition of obedience, that such material as the laws and governmental rules and decisions must be freely available to the public and made known as widely as possible. Hence, there must be no restriction on the reproduction and dissemination of such documents. We find that despite our aspirations, our system of government is no longer free to the governed to access in the method of the times. I ask you to hack the law. The law belongs to you. What does it mean to hack the law? Code runs on our software like web browsers, and it is often best, just like Firefox, when the code is free to study, the source code, free to customize, modify, and improve upon, and free to redistribute. Legal code is the source code that operates our government. For far too long, that has not been free. Code should be free to study, free to customize, free to improve upon, and free to redistribute. The law is not immutable. It is a living and breathing, ever-changing, and in the end, it affects every moment of your daily life. The legal code is iterative as software. We start with the laws. We modify them with legislation, pass that legislation into new laws, then begin the process anew when those new laws are enforced or not. Developers like us are privileged because we have something unique to offer the world. We have the tools to help provide citizens who have the right to access, to understand, shift, and yes, hack the law with the tools they need. We can create progress to provide open APIs to empower developers to share civic data in user-friendly formats like Sunlight Foundation has done with OpenStates.org. We can create programs to allow the public to find and comment on legislation like Participatory Politics Foundation has done with OpenCongress.org and Councilmatic. We can share state laws in easily accessible, searchable, and understandable formats for free because the law should be free, like OpenGov Foundation has done with States Decoded. We can draft and authenticate legal code because we must work from the most up-to-date legal code using free and open source software developed by cities like Washington, D.C. Or we can create an architecture to put these tools together with free and open source software that cities, states, and every municipality across the nation can use for their own legislative websites. And in fact, that is the challenge that I wish to issue for you today. In 1961, President John F. Kennedy demonstrated to us the value of setting goals when he declared, "I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieve the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth." In 1969, the United States of America's Apollo 11 mission did just that. Today, I set a similar challenge. I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before the year is out of building Democracy 2.0, a free and open source democracy platform. Please join me in building the spaceship democracy. After this, when we break off into hacking sessions to try to achieve the goal that we're talking about right now, I ask you to join me in developing architecture for this Democracy 2.0 platform that we can share with every legislature and municipal government in the United States. The platform would architecture for allowing legislatures to easily access these needed features. It is my sincerest hope that we can reconvene in the fall to test and demonstrate a minimum viable product, an MVP, as we build towards a release of Democracy 2.0, a free and open source democracy platform, next year. It is now my honor to introduce somebody who's actually been my inspiration, Supervisor Mark Farrell. He's a leader in San Francisco on free and open source, as well as making the government there more transparent. And I hope that together, New York City and San Francisco will be able to have a long partnership of working together to bring Democracy 2.0, Government 2.0, and in our cases, legislatures 2.0, so that everyone in the country can achieve and appreciate the same type of democracy that Mark and I are trying to bring to our cities. And without further ado, Mark.
Thank you, Ben, and thanks for your speech very much and for your introduction. I want to also thank the organizers of the MIT Legal Hackathon, to Dazza Greenwood and his team at Civics and the hackers, all of you for participating today. So my name is Mark Farrell. I am the supervisor from District 2 here in San Francisco. Just by way of background, I started my career as an attorney down in Silicon Valley after having gone to law school back east at University of Pennsylvania. I spent 3 years as a corporate attorney in Silicon Valley, then became an investment banker here in San Francisco, so spent 5 years in the finance world, and then started a venture fund with a few other partners. And in 2010 decided to run for office for a number of reasons, and was elected and have been serving in office since 2011 here on the San Francisco Board of Supervisors. I continue to work at my venture fund when I'm not inside of City Hall. And really my experience before becoming involved in the political world has really informed what I do quite a bit inside of City Hall. You know, whether you think about the issues that we work on here in San Francisco relating to technology, Ben talked about, a lot about open data and the OpenGov projects that we're working on now. But to me, it's been really important, and to also be a leader of the Board of Supervisors here in San Francisco to work on and advance open data and open government legislation projects here inside of San Francisco. I will tell you right now, across the country, especially with Councilman Kallos and other people, it is exciting to see the leadership that we're seeing from other cities and states throughout the country. And I think we're really at a unique opportunity in time where not only are people inside of government getting excited about it, we have hackathons like this happening. We actually, I will tell you, have venture money going into companies that are building on open gov projects and open data projects. We have venture funds that are forming just around open government. And I think this is a really exciting point in time, and so I hope you're excited to be part of what we're all trying to do today. So I thought I'd share with you two things that I've been working on specifically inside of San Francisco. The first was last year in September. Our city started working with the OpenGov Foundation to open up and access our city's laws, and so we launched something called sanfranciscocode.org. And this was a civic engagement tool to bring our city's laws and policies in a more accessible and modern format that can be used and reused, and to allow our residents to really take a look at what the laws are on our books. You know, in San Francisco, we are experiencing incredible growth in terms of our technology community, really becoming a global center of innovation. And from my perspective, inside of government, we need to do all that we can to bring that innovation to our residents. Not just people that work in the tech industry per se, but the people that live their daily lives inside of our cities and see how that technology revolution can really shape their lives. And so through sanfranciscocode.org last year, my office received a lot of feedback, and one in particular, we had a constituent that left an email and a comment that about one of our laws on our books in San Francisco. And believe it or not, we still have a law on our books that says that the only thing we are legally allowed to have in our garages in San Francisco are automobiles. We can't have bicycles, we can't have strollers, we can't have baby toys, we can't have anything else. Obviously, it's an outdated law. It doesn't make any sense in this world. And so Gary, my constituent, left a comment, and I agreed and became the first supervisor in the city of San Francisco to introduce law stemming from direct constituent feedback on this new platform. And, you know, from my perspective, legislators across the country, we always talk about being responsive to our constituents and being held accountable. And this is a real tangible example where we actually had a law that was commented on through sanfranciscocode.org, obviously an outdated and ridiculous law, that we're now being able to change. And to me, that's something that really, if you think about getting the public to be more engaged with our civic process, that's exactly what we should be doing. And so I actually launched, to build off the success of that, launched a partnership with the OpenGov Foundation called Reimagine SF. And it's a scholarship opportunity here in San Francisco for undergraduate and graduate students to take another look at our laws and really re-envision what they want San Francisco to be and to propose changes to the laws that we have on our books. The scholarship opportunity is going to be for $1,000 each for their undergrad or grad school. It's not the most amount of money in the world, but it's enough to get people excited. And I will tell you, there are some interesting things that we've gotten feedback on, so hopefully I'll share with this group later on down the line some of the things that have come out of it. But really, what I want to mention real quick to back up what Ben's saying, you know, what I've been doing lately as well is working on an open data piece of legislation, which I hope is of interest to everyone here. And I really need your help, and I know Ben needs your help to cross the finish line here. And what the goal of this legislation is to make San Francisco the first open legislation city in the country. It subscribes to the idea that legislative information should be treated as open data. So what we're doing is mandating that our city upload and host all of our legislation in machine-readable format that are consistent with some of the open data standards we recently passed. And this motion is going to make our legislative data easier to use for constituents, for third parties, and also for outside developers who want to better interact with our legislative process and create tools and modern formats to really allow our residents to get engaged with our government. So we've worked with the OpenGov Foundation, the Sunlight Foundation, both of obviously who are nonpartisan, nonprofit, national leaders in this movement, and advocate for government transparency at all levels. From my perspective, this is going to allow, you know, these modern applications and platforms and developments out of our city information, and really, again, engage our residents. And just like Ben mentioned, I hope to utilize these tools and services to crowdsource ideas and input on policies that I want to put forward into the future. And by the time I'm gone from city government, that future legislators will be able to do. And I'm just a big believer that in City Hall we should be using technology and the services that it provides to interact with our constituents and on policy issues that matter to them. And through this motion we can achieve that. So, you know, Councilmember Kallos spoke a few minutes ago and challenged you to really help create what we're, you know, trying to define as Democracy 2.0, open platform that cities and states can use across the country, really as a format and a tool. And we're the ground floor right now. And so you really have an opportunity to be engaged here and to be a monumental part of what we're doing. And I joined Councilmember Kallos in challenging you to help create this platform so we can keep modernizing our process. You know, it's a time we see across our country, certainly a lot in D.C., hopefully not in our cities as much, when politics really become toxic. And we do have an opportunity to make things a lot better and make sure governments are more transparent and more accountable through this work. And we're not alone in this challenge. We're starting to create this opportunity across our country. I want to thank you for the work that you're doing and you're going to begin to do here today to really bring our government into the 21st century and make it part of our residents' daily lives. So thanks to all the hackers, again to Dazza and his team over at Civics and the organizers of the MIT Legal Hackathon, and in particular to Ben, to Councilmember Kallos, thanks for your leadership here. Look forward to doing this more and more together, and certainly want to turn it back to you, and thanks for all of your involvement.
Bring us in.
Thank you, Supervisor Farrell. I can tell you that I don't think we could get any of this done without unity. The people united cannot be defeated. And that being said, I'd like to turn it over to the people.
There's two people right here, and Supervisor Farrell and Councilman Kallos. Seamus and I were moved by your remarks and by the challenge. And I think it would be safe to say, correct me if I'm wrong, we accept the challenge.
Absolutely. You guys have thrown down the gauntlet today, but also in all the work that we've been doing together. This is something that we cannot achieve by ourselves. The challenge you just laid out to us really boils down to reinventing democracy, and everybody in this room and watching online has a role to play in achieving that. You know, Tom Neal and Sunlight, we've got the Participatory Politics Foundation and David Moore, we've got Jonathan Askin, we've got lawyers, we've got developers, we've got elected officials, we've got civic hackers and nonprofit foundation. That's exactly the approach, the holistic collaborative approach that does transform institutions in this country from the day we were founded up through now. And I hope that we fulfill your challenge and put a man on the moon of open government.
Here, here. And so anyone that wants to join in meeting this challenge, start at 2 p.m. today when we'll begin our first hacking session. And fortunately, we'll have Ben with us in person, but there is a continuing group now, the Free Law 5, I believe you call it, we're between with Supervisor Farrell and Councilman Kallos and representatives from 3 other cities that meet periodically. And we'll have people, therefore, from time to time, won't you convene that group so that we can show progress and get feedback. And you said you want an MVP by the end of the summer, and you want something that is operational, it's production grade, at least for a start, a year from today at the 2nd annual kickoff of the MIT Legal Hackathon, perhaps. Well, we've got a schedule, we have a goal that can be measured. The next step would be a roadmap. What are the components of that legislative system? What are the components of publishing the law? What kind of schema would be needed? What are the inputs and outputs and the flows? How can the public provide comment? That would be a capability. How can annotations be supported? That would be a capability. I think that's pretty much a description of the basic core components of the capabilities within that meeting those, measuring that we met them would meet the challenge, I hope. If that's so, well, let's figure that out in a roadmap and iteratively get there and give people something that they can succeed at, and that ultimately you can say, yes, you met, or we didn't meet it, with some measurable kind of metric at the end. So between now and a year from now, I know we can get there.
Amen.
Great. So thank you, Supervisor Farrell, for being able to join us and begin to hack the law in such a meaningful way as you have, and can hardly wait to support your efforts going forward. They're here. And with that, back to our elected leaders. Good. And actually, now I suppose it's actually back to me. And so you were, I know you've got a hard stop, Mark, with your staff told us about something that you've got to run to at some point, but we're now going from the remarks and the challenge, which sort of sets a tone for the hacking, some of the sessions here at this group, to a dialogue, a Q&A and discussion. And so you're welcome to stay for as much of that as you can until whenever you need to. But we've got some great people in the room and a remarkable stable of people online that have been engaged in dialogue, not only on Twitter, on our HackPad, and our various communication kind of networks that is this legal hackathon online. And so I think we've got some questions and we've got some ideas and people that want to talk. So this dialogue will continue, I imagine, for a year on and off. So please do stay as long as you can.
Thanks. Yeah, I definitely have a few minutes. So,
and we lost your signal a little bit there. If I could just maybe kick us off, my question for both of you would be, so San Francisco, New York have the same problems in a sense, the same aspiration for this democracy 2.0 platform comprised of the components you've both been working on, but you're also different. You have different technologies, different legal requirements in some cases, different practices and processes. Do you have any advice for those of us that are taking the challenge on where to draw the line between having something general enough so it could work really for any city or state, I would think, of the nation to use and configure for their needs, but not be either too idiosyncratic or so general it's not really truly useful for the purpose? Like how should we be addressing meeting the needs of multiple cities? This may have come up in your work before. Any advice would be helpful, if you understand the question.
Yeah, this is Mark. I'll take a first stab at this. I think it strikes me you are absolutely right that cities are very different, and I think all of our technology platforms, I would have to imagine, are very different. I was completely shocked having come from the private sector. When I first came into government in 2011, we were still running Lotus Notes for email, believe it or not. And it took moving heaven and earth to really get onto Microsoft 365 platform. And not every city department is on that right now. So San Francisco has a long way to go in terms of our own internal infrastructure. And the irony is not lost that we become the technology hub here in San Francisco of a number of innovative companies throughout the world. Yet our own infrastructure is pretty far behind. But what I do think in terms of the people that are starting to work on this would be my thoughts is really to work with the vendors that are the predominant ones like Granicus that really supply and really have become the outsourced providers to different cities across the country. And so I guess the comment is really to stay general because I think you're going to have to create a platform that every city is going to have to really modify on its own and really have a technology department that's going to be willing to work with it and create and customize it. But really, I think having an eye towards what some of those vendors are doing right now that are prevalent, but also some of the vendors, whether it be open source, open gov type vendors that are going to become prevalent in the future, and really make sure you have a dialogue with them to see what types of technologies they're promoting, what they're using, and what they can promote, and to really tie into them. I think that's going to have the quickest effect from my perspective.
Terrific, thank you. Ben, any thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I think that starting with targeting vendors that have already taken a large market share, like Granicus, is a great first step. I come at this as a open source developer, but before I get too far into the weeds on that, I'm one of 51. And I would love to be the one that everyone's going to follow on every single thing. But at the end of the day, even people who are watching this who are software developers and want to get investors, you have to have an MVP. You have to have a workable product to show your investors. And so the reason that I've asked for an MVP is because I need to be able to show to people who are used to hearing from vendors that things take not months but years and don't take a couple of $1,000s but cost millions or billions of dollars. And I come from a city where we almost spent $1 billion. We spent $700 million on a time management system called CityTime, and nobody until the very end seemed to realize that maybe that was a lot of money to be spending on a piece of software. So that's something to keep in mind. So when we're looking at how to build things, what I'm dealing with is people who don't remember that once upon a time there was WordStar and WordPerfect and Microsoft Word. They're used to a software monoculture. They're also used to a culture where nobody ever got fired for hiring IBM or Microsoft. And so what they need to be able to have is a product that they can touch, that they can feel, that they can demo and show people that can build confidence, so that when people are running around afraid of open source, because that's the messaging that people are getting from vendors. Don't use open source. It's scary. It's dangerous. Use Microsoft Word. Don't use open source. Use Internet Explorer. So most of us are using Firefox and other items that come out of that Firefox world. And so when people ask me what is open source, I say, remember Internet Explorer being pretty bad? And they say, well, it's still bad. And then I say, well, Firefox is what we all created, and that's free and open source. And I try to explain to people that it's about a license, not so much the code. But getting back to what would be helpful is competition is great. I'm a Drupal developer. Some people like WordPress. Other people still like Joomla. That community is not as strong as the Drupal community, but we need different components. We need an ability to draft the code. We need an ability to host that code in a place where people can comment on it and interact with it. And then we need a place where once you publish that code, it can go to somewhere where that code is hosted. And so as part of my initial remarks, I identified some of the people who are already there, and what would be helpful from those of you in the audience is help us identify the competitors. Right now we have Open Congress, we have Councilmatic, we have Madison. All three of them are well suited for hosting the legislation. We also have Granicus. So we've got 4 products out there. I think helping to identify and coalesce around a project or multiple projects would be incredibly helpful, and then making sure that for each piece that we build, that we've created a standardized framework would be helpful. So if we're going to use a markup language for our legislation, then that means we can easily take legislation, have it drafted, and then we just need something to connect the legislation that's being drafted to the legislation that's being hosted for comment. And then once we have the legislation hosted for comment, we need a connector that will connect it to being published as the law. And then when we host the law, we need a connector that will take us to the iterative process where when somebody looks at the law and says, this law is broken, I don't like it, they can click on it, and then that can start the whole legislative process over again. So my emphasis would be creating more free and open source products, making sure we are aware of all the folks in the space, get them all into a room, and competition drives our economy in America, and it's a good as long as we can make sure that we have a free and open source framework and a standard that we can all agree to, so that we can all compete in a free market.
Here, here. And I suppose the closing question for this part of the dialogue would be whether it would be possible to, as we go, say, I don't know, 3 months, 6 months,
I don't know if you can hear me, guys, but you guys are on mute.
So the question, I'm sorry, I was going to be, could you think, Mark, we could come back to you in a few months when we have talked with the vendors and developed selected and or developed solutions, done a gap analysis, and have something to show, to check with the people in your governments who would be responsible for eventually adopting or migrating, to get some deeper feedback iteratively. So we thought, we begin to think, well, maybe that standard should be this, maybe the adapter should be that. We can get a little bit more traction from multiple of the first you two are a great start, but maybe we've got some other of the Free Law 5 and others who you need to push against somebody to get feedback so we don't get to the end of a year and have some brilliant idea that really is dead on arrival for practical reasons.
Without a doubt, one of the things I didn't talk about is I actually authored some additional open data legislation last year at the Board of Supervisors here in San Francisco. And it's ironic, hearing Ben talk. It's a plus and a minus, but I'm one of 11 here in San Francisco as opposed to one of 51. And again, that can cut both ways. But one of the things that called for in that legislation was that every city department had to appoint someone that was going to be in charge of kind of being in charge of creating that open data sets that they're going to now put forward on a routine basis here in San Francisco. And so we're actually going to have people in different city departments that are really in charge of that. And so, in a number of months' time, absolutely, I think they're going to be, it's probably the right time to talk to them, to really get them, to get their feedback and really to also, I think to get their feedback, also to push them as well. I have to imagine this is change. It's not easy. We've encountered a lot of not unnatural resistance, but people who've done certain things a certain way for a long time. And so I think that, I think that a number of months' time would be a great time to re-engage and have some outside, really, voices be part of that.
You're on.
In terms of timeline, software code has a habit of outpacing legal code by orders of magnitude. What I think would be incredibly helpful, at least amongst the Free Law 5 and any other municipalities, is in New York City and in San Francisco, you have folks like Mark and myself, and I'm not sure how many of legislators there are like us. If you're out there over the internet, you're watching this, please get in touch with us so that we can build out our coalition. And I think it would be helpful for us to form a working group of the CTOs and the government employees that are getting these demands and facing these demands so that they can have the support of one another. In terms of timelines, I can tell you that we just had a hearing on open law in New York City on Monday, and the timeline for that is our contract is going to be expiring at the end of the year, and my hope is that instead of paying the New York legal publishing company, that we have a suite of nonprofits who are offering a very similar service for a far less cost, and being able for New York City, San Francisco, and others to all get together and say, you know what, we'd all like to jointly, as part of a civic commons, purchase this software as a service so that we are contributing to a free and open source software repository and paying developers to build it instead of buying the same product over and over again, which is kind of ridiculous if you think about it, because if it costs $30,000 to build something the first time, why would you charge everybody else $30,000? That's pure profit, and that's literally the government subsidizing corporations, and at the end of the day that becomes corporate welfare. It's much better investment at this point in time to purchase around a free and open source license. We also have open legislation. We just passed that. Our city is working closely with Granicus to make that a reality, and I'm very hopeful about where that will be going. But at the end of the day, I'd really like us to have competition in the marketplace. I'm looking for the Firefox that will take us to having an Internet Explorer that is where it needs to be, and eventually having a Chrome jump out of nowhere.
Fox law.
Fair enough. And then in terms of legislative drafting, Washington, D.C.'s taken a huge lead on it. but I can tell you right now the New York City Council is trying to find what we should be using for legislative drafting. And then Open API is something that hopefully Granicus will be rolling out. I hope to work closely with Supervisor Farrell to create and make sure that demand is there. Anyone watching from other cities, it would be helpful if you and your communities told your legislators that it was important to them. And the other key piece is government is very slow to move, and it cannot keep up with technology, but when technology outpaces government, government is really good about being shamed into action. When Tom, Neil, and I put the legislation online, it took 6 months for them to do it themselves after literally decades and years of them refusing to do it. So I think you have a huge opportunity there, and thank you for the great question.
Awesome. Well, we just realized that people don't have a place to say come to. So we've been asking people to come do help. The Free Law 5 has been very informal so far. So just as a placeholder, we have created legalhackathon.org/freelaw5, one word, where we will publish all the relevant information here that we come up with. And then one of the great things about Ben and Mark working together, and with the other cities as well, is now we have some mature adult oversight here, and you can tell us if and when you have a domain name or other place or places, forum or forums, that you would like people to work with to meet the challenge over time. Then we will point to that. But for now, because we've got a session here at MIT to help to convene and to catalyze and to enable and support launch this, we have a page here, and that's where you can look as the weekend unfolds for what we're hacking together, and links to Sunlight and the other partners that are working on these things, and right back to Mark's office and his work, Ben's office and his work, and the other partners. And as soon as Ben and Mark have a meeting and talk about it a bit, you may well have a domain name or some other place for it. That is terrific. We'll immediately point right there. And that's one of the wonderful things about it being you, the elected leaders, leading in this way now. So thank you for your leadership. And for now, I'll do my part here and see if we can unleash some of the great minds and amazing innovation at MIT in support of you. And I know Seamus has a jet propulsion factory as well for innovation. Many of us do. So thank you for giving us, telling us what is important, where to contribute. We need to actually begin to close this session down now and give people time to, have a disco nap and change their clothes, because we're going out to the clubs. It's hacking time. So we'll be back for the hacking party at 2 p.m., everybody. And so do look at our schedule then to see the sessions. Andy Perlman from Suffolk will be giving a great session on crowdsourcing effective legal language for all you legislators out there. He's got a brilliant idea that we can test, that we will be testing. And we've got some other wonderful sessions, and of course the sessions which Ben will be joining us in person, Seamus and others, where we'll start to think about what that roadmap is and help kind of, on this auspicious day of the birth of this baby, kind of get it, some things it needs. We'll get some college bonds, we'll get a crib, we'll do a basic setup so you have a great start after the weekend. With that, I thank you for taking the time and the attention from your really busy schedules to be able to be with us today. You honor us, and we'll do what we can to show respect for that by achieving, by helping you achieve your vision. Thank you.
Thanks, Dazza.
What happened to that?
Okay, bye-bye now.